This is my favorite shop.
Hello. Martin, I have 5 grandchildren. I want to buy violins for them.
Rio André, who constructed a waltzes _ with Fate playing have been cancelled _ everything following a horrifying _ collapse. His body ultimately told him to stop at age 74. Fans from Mexico City _ were sent home to watch Terminated, and his son has since _ taken authority over his enormous kingdom, the startling reality that the man who does 100 owns 80 homes and displays a year may have to resign despite the fact that he vowed to continue playing until he was 140. His last performance in Maastricht might be his Until We Meet Again. Rieu was born in Maastricht, Netherlands into a family in 1949 where love was everything and music was everything. His father was the most difficult to locate. The Maastricht Symphony's conductor orchestra was a devout man who supported discipline rather than love. André was the growing up as the third of 6 children. Their house had a more military feel to it. Less of a space for children to hug, and his parents were strict and lacked warmth. Roman Catholics who held to the rule of law being quiet, they did not permit friends to when they visited, they hardly laughed at all. Stated, "My parents weren't very fond of me much. It wasn't a hunch. Something he held in high regard, and it remained with him since childhood." And his parents' innate vitality clashed with his mother was so preoccupied with frigid style. Grades and practice in music that occur when instructors referred to André as an artist, and she felt that kind of attitude made André feel humiliated. Feel inconspicuous unless he was acting perfectly. He went to therapy for years, attempting to comprehend why his early years felt incredibly empty, yet perhaps that emptiness turned into gasoline that might eventually be useful. He alters the way the world perceives at the age of 5 or so, classical music. When something unexpected occurred, André fell in love. Using his fiddle instead of the violin instructor who was 18 years old, blonde, and attractive. He had trouble focusing while lessons since he was preoccupied with her, but his crush on her offered him an excuse to daily. He picks up the instrument, didn't give a damn about technique or scales. Simply wished to emulate her playing style. He observed how she moved her hands. Sound, and in a matter of weeks, whereas other children were still having trouble with simple notes. André had already discovered vibra, the emotional swaying in the sound that results in music seems alive, which is why it has stayed with me. Him not feeling flawless as he matured, tension with his father alone when he gets older worsened, and they refused to play. He desired stern, solemn classical music. To make it happy and enjoyable, but to his that notion was offensive. Father, when he wanted to play waltzes, André informed him. His dad yelled, "I didn't teach you." It was a chilly denial to perform waltzes. And the temperature dropped much further when André brought home Marjorie, his future bride. Rather than greeting her, his mother instructed her to go, and instructed André to return to his tidy room like a youngster who was he left with the last straw. Marjorie, and they never turned back. His parents never arrived at a not even during one of his performances when he was packing venues around the globe. His father passed away in 1992. Without ever witnessing André's become, but the reason for all of this rejection while working, André was formulating a plan. He began playing in his father's orchestra. Observe something odd in the majority of it appeared that musicians were unconcerned about they discussed the weather and music. Complained about the lack of liveliness in the pay, but then something extraordinary happened during the anchors. In the event that the orchestra performed a Strauss waltz, and all of a sudden the crowd came to life, and people grinned and hummed. Though when the energy altered, André realized he wanted to listen to this type of music. Play to move rather than to please critics. He played a gentle serenade for the people one day. For a woman who was dying and hadn't opened her eyes in days, yet as the tunes moved through she immediately opened them in the room. André recognized the actual influence of music. Being flawless wasn't the goal, it was regarding emotion, which is when the notion of forming his own ensemble began to grow with his baby in 1978 at the age of 29. Son at home with few funds, André began modestly, creating with only a Maastricht Salon orchestra. A small group of musicians performed town halls and weddings wherever they might. Border towns close to Belgium and Germany, they performed traditional waltzes, and the majority of people salon music forgotten that they weren't glamorous, weren't profitable, but André, he was doing what he liked, therefore he didn't care. One evening, during a little performance during his match against France, Lehar poured his gold and silver waltz. Felt something and put his heart into it. Shift, the music seemed to respond. Same evening, he concluded that this was his future, was unconcerned about detractors. Claimed it was corny and didn't give a damn whether he thought classical, but the elite scoffed. There was delight in music, and he wasn't intending to cease until everyone else has witnessed it. Additionally, in 1987, André Rieu was at a pivotal moment. He was about 40 years old and had been in charge of the Maastricht Salon Orchestra for about a decade, but there was an odd feeling to the enthusiasm. Gone, the boundaries were obvious, and the old format simply wasn't sufficient anymore. He wants something more substantial. He didn't merely wish to perform music that he had composed, magic, the type of happiness and display the emotions that people had when Johann Strauss. He would play the violin while moving his entire body, while the energy, rhythm, and fun that Rieu wanted to give people a sense of aliveness. It back, but the choice wasn't simple. To begin something fresh, one had to take an enormous danger in employing a professional. He wasn't the actual money that musicians meant. Rich, each musician he invited signified additional financial strain on his own. Reservations for shoulders were unclear and not precisely what classical music was renowned for, taking chances, but deep down he knew he had to make an attempt. On January 1, 1988, with his new The Johann Strauss Orchestra's founding had at its debut performance, there were only 12 musicians and a small audience, but it felt odd in some way. Rieu didn't dress according to the guidelines. The orchestra, wearing their typical black, didn't maintain a proper and silent stage. He played folk tunes that made people chuckle. Dramatic flair and lighting. Critics disliked it and dubbed it gimmicky and inexpensive, yet the audience, they clapped, grinned, and participated. He wasn't the spark that Rieu had discovered. Ready to let it go, but then the time, it was in May 1995 that everything changed. Throughout the Champions League final in Bayern Munich and Vienna, Ajax were fighting to the end, and at halftime Rieu experienced something out of the ordinary, and his orchestra entered the field and performed the waltz number by Shostakovich. 2. The song was now well known to Dutch viewers due to a television advertising, but nobody anticipated what happened. Next, all 50,000 footballs in the stadium, fans began to lose and sway while humming themselves in the song, which was different. Has anyone noticed any cameras? Transmitted to 300 million people in real time. Individuals throughout Europe. It wasn't merely the halftime performance was a cultural shocking events. In the weeks after Rieu, 200,000 CDs were sold of the Strauss and the Business that was released that year prior to its abrupt explosion. It remained at 19 weeks at the top of the Dutch charts, heterosexual people becoming the nation's the decade's best-selling album. Those who have no interest in classical, his albums were now being purchased. Attending his performances and falling in love with waltzes. Music specialists continue to discuss beautiful game of football as the instant André Rieu developed into more than a violinist. Formed a movement, although not all of them were delighted by the global success of classical music. Responded aggressively, claiming that he was a phony. He was accused of eroding tradition. him of transforming music from millennia ago into a circus in a harsh critique of a well-known. The conductor even referred to his performances as music critics detested musical pornography. The theatrical gags, the vibrant costumes, the streamlined plans and the enormous makes the action much more intense. 2008, when Rieu constructed a duplicate of ice fountains at the Schönbrunn Palace in Vienna, all for a stage, including rinks and horses. Background, purists, and €34 million were appalled that Rieu hadn't returned. He felt that music should be a part of everyone, not just the specialists. At one place halls he desired parents, lecturers, and children cleans for everyone's enjoyment. Music that was previously hidden behind rigid customs and the harsh reality to disregard the millions of admirers who adored him. They danced in his sold-out concerts. The aisles, and they purchased numerous albums. In 1994, Strauss and Associates had already caused a stir, but after 1995 performance, which skyrocketed only in the Netherlands did it sell 750,000 copies in Germany in a few of months. It shot straight up to the top 5 of the demonstrate, something unprecedented for by the time it peaked, classical music had sold more than 3 million copies globally. It sold more than some of the most well-known brands in pop, such as Bon Jovi and Celine Dion, in significant European markets. Even a significant record retailers began to increase shelf space. Due to him, classical music insiders in the business dubbed it the Rieu impact. Universal Music stated that his more money was produced from records than any other. He wasn't merely creating art as a classical artist. He was reworking all of the business's music. Of this originated from the One Dangerous Choice in 1987. When he gave his gang that people thought of after Johann Strauss. He was being conceited, but eventually he showed them incorrectly by not replacing. In the 1980s, Strauss brought him back to life. The waltzes of Strauss were barely dying off. They were played by everyone, but by 2010 Strauss's music performances had expanded 16 times over. Primarily as a result of Rieu and his orchestra began with 12 musicians have developed into more than 60. That is considerably bigger than Strauss's group in 1999. To commemorate the 100th Rieu's anniversary of Strauss's passing, published a tribute album and discussed his profound respect. Even the Austrian he was awarded by the government with one of their top national honors for maintaining keeping the nation's musical legacy alive and well. Rieu performed more than only classical music. Made it a worldwide occasion in 2008, he done a thing that nobody anticipated from he constructed a gigantic facsimile of the Fiddler Schönbrunn Palace in Vienna and took it on tour. We're discussing a full-scale fortress that accompanied him on his global travels. It was more than just a background. It had actual chandeliers, ice rinks, fountains, and even it was horse-drawn carriages from Vienna. Greater than the Rolling Stones had ever constructed, and not only for show. Rieu aimed to convey the enchantment of Vienna to those who would never be able to afford it. The logistics were crazy there. It took him 100 workers 6 hours to set up. Days to construct the stage, but it was worthwhile. Stadiums all throughout Europe were crowded with spectators. And Australia, in Melbourne alone, the Telstra Dome was packed with 68,65 spectators to watch him shatter the record for the largest ever classical concert conducted during 3 shows in Australia. Nearly 90,000 individuals arrived in the city, and he was selling back home in Europe arenas as quickly. At one point in Australia, his DVDs were the most popular. Charts that have 8 of the top 10 only Pink and AC/DC were able to sneak in. This wasn't merely a run of good fortune. Rieu's performances were so well liked that he broke into the top 10 list of the most grossing travels around the world, rubbing shoulder to shoulder with celebrities like Madonna and the Police. Are not horrible for a man named the Waltz King, and if that wasn't sufficient revenue from his album and DVD sales, he has over 500 platinum trophies. which is a figure that no other classical musician possesses, ever touched to commemorate the occasion he was given a custom by Universal Music Chrome Violin Award. They claimed they had never witnessed success in the realm of music, but not all was gold and glitter in the catastrophe of 2016. Happened during what was meant to be a Rieu's Happy Christmas tour in the UK. Ruud Merckx, a veteran trombonist, suffered an unexpected heart arrest when he was asleep while Leeds was the location of the orchestra he had spent more than 2 years with Rieu. Decades, his spouse has been playing the violin and accompanied by an orchestra. They had 2 kids at home when the time came. Rieu, the gang is like a punch to the chest. Without any hesitation, he led the Nottingham perform that evening, and shortly after, London's remaining UK trip was postponed. Glasgow, Manchester, and Birmingham are all gone. From what Rieu considered his calendar, he planned to orchestrate a family. One of them had stayed with him for over losing one of their own rights for 25 years prior to Christmas. Merckx was devastated. Was returned to the Netherlands by air, where 5 days later, he died when Rieu eventually made it back to the UK in March. Something had altered the magic. Remained present, although there were less people there. People recalled the events that took place in December, when he and Rieu also had enchanted the world for decades with his music, but he will return in March 2024. At age 74, he almost broke traveling to Mexico City. Was continuing to tour the world with the vitality of a man half his age before his after only 2, the body abruptly gave out. Performances. André passed out after a harsh combination of high altitude, jet lag, and Mexico City is sitting over a severe illness. 2,000 meters above sea level forced him to go beyond even his orchestra players were on the edge. Impacted by handling nosebleeds and fatigue, but it was harder for André. Felt lightheaded and overheated, as if in his own words, 100 years old. That evening he called his wife backstage and told I don't understand something he had never mentioned before. Wished to have this first concert day. Moreover, it was the first instance of unstoppable showman acknowledged that he could. The concerts needed to be slowed down. 40,000 fans lost out on the cancellation, and a man who took great satisfaction in never being absent. This wasn't a performance that had to go home. For a brief moment, André had been enduring illness for years. In 2010, a popular video caused him to lose his equilibrium. His inner ear infection, which halted his tour and required several months to recuperate from what he even did using a 2019, saw a high fever, but he never allowed anyone to observe the suffering. But Mexico was unique. His legs trembled, and he believed he couldn't hold on. He spoke it out this time. Loudly, he made it home to MRI. It was obvious that he would not torment himself. No longer his son Pierre, who had previously taken over the majority of the company. Now, obligations went one step further. He began transforming the way that trips were no more demanding. Overseas travel is planned. Travels, they no longer pushed themselves to the limit. Began organizing more intimate, smaller shows. Europe alone, perhaps never again. Pierre was no longer just a company manager, he was now in charge of maintaining his. Over the years, he had gradually kept his father secure. Removed the burden from André's shoulders. Managing the crew's logistics and maintaining everything is operating without a hitch and is being utilized. To desire authority over everything, he now fully trusted Pierre. Their relationship had become closer. Following each near miss, following each behind-the-scenes and health scare, Pierre was now in charge of directing the ship, ensuring his dad could still pursue his passions without jeopardizing his life to do it. But André's path hasn't solely concerned with health risks and 2015's musical highs. He had to deal with an unexpected debate with no basis. Music-related activities during one of his well-known summer performances in Maastricht 11. Kids from a music ensemble in Romania appeared on stage as a part of a group led by the legendary pan flute player George Zamfir. Everything appeared to be all right until André was smacked by Dutch officials with a huge fine alleging the children had carried out outside of the legally permitted working hours for children, later lowered to €236,000. But still one of the biggest cultural discoveries in the Netherlands' history, André's group retaliated by claim that the kids didn't really perform after 11 p.m. and have just returned to wave at the curtain call on stage, and the children were officially under it took two under Zamfir's guidance, not André's. Years of legal disputes, but ultimately according to the court, he wasn't. The fine was dismissed for their employer. Nevertheless, the case sparked curiosity, and according to some detractors, it affected his. Despite these shadows, André's reputation. Rieu maintained his relationship with individuals in 2019 when a group of psychological musicians with disabilities had all there. Without hesitation, André took the instruments. He saw the article in the newspaper and offered to replace everything. Just like that, €20,000 worth of equipment? PR gimmick with no major announcement, merely generosity. As well as when Notre Dame Cathedral burned up, he provided 700 tons of silent gestures for the repair of steel that showed an aspect of him that wasn't constantly garner media attention, followed by his at one time, Stradivarius was valuable. Financial difficulties almost compelled him to sell it. He put it up at a ridiculous price for safety's sake, and when things got it's better that he removed it from sale. The violin is more than just wood and strings. He currently plays a rare 1732 as part of himself. Delivers it twice a year to the Model Vienna for a master's maintenance. After disassembling it, the craftsman polishes it and ensures that everything remains flawless. On every visit, they are protected like treasure. André Rieu could serve as the spokesperson for the happiest orchestra in the world, yet behind the violinist's smile is a silent powerhouse. Kept together by a few family members. Startling revelations that it all begins with Marjorie, his wife, is viewed by most admirers as only André's lifelong companion, but she's something extra, something concealed, for she has been writing music for the past few decades. Orchestra without ever acknowledging her. The music is where the work lives, not the attention, but André emerged as the main attraction. Marjorie remained a supporting character, directing the visual, forming the sound, and encouraging him to produce a new work when classical music's traditional realm does not longer thrilled him. She was the one, too, who advocated for one of the most audacious actions, the couple's purchase of a century. The call unexpectedly came from the old castle. They were away on vacation when they heard a portion of the 15th from the accountant. Mr. Castle was for sale at the century. Without hesitation, Marjorie said, "Sell more records," she uttered, and then when the Rieu family purchased it, it wasn't simply a house. It turned into the main office of the André turned the entire Rieu operation around. Cold, dark rooms into a bright, warm one. He designed the imaginary land. He was combining Austrian Bavarian with the castle is now a part of Venetian architecture. Office, performance area, and dream, and you can still hear the sound of the musical reverberations, and the murmurs of the empire was shaped by family decisions. The following generation is presently entering Daisy, André's granddaughter in that world. Despite only being 9, she's already playing the piano and practicing with the orchestra. It's not a gimmick. This is the silent way that the Rieu heritage operates. Progressively via talent and love, André understands what it's like to grow up in music. Daisy is living it now, just as he did. Similarly to what her father Pierre did. Years prior to his relocation from working behind the scenes to become the Rio de Janeiro Orchestra's business director. Children are not coerced by their families into. They open the door to let the spotlight in. They enter and bide their time until the music to start. André Rieu did more than merely perform music. He destroyed everything that created classical music performances seem chilly. Ceremonies in the distance when he entered the stage. It has nothing to do with posture or silence. Tuxedos were about happiness if you felt he urged you to dance in the aisles. If you felt like crying or clapping or singing, you were situated correctly by the late. He was telling audiences in the 2010s ball gowns are not necessary unless he turned as they prepared to spin in them. The symphony into a gathering with guests adored him for it in the past. Concerts of classical music seemed more like talks followed by live performances in stiff clothing, silent throngs, and strict regulations that even clapping inappropriately could get you a sour look, something Rieu detested. Following years of playing in traditional orchestras, he got tired of the chilly separation between. He flipped because of bands and audiences. The screenplay. His performances started to feel weddings more than recitals full of fake snow, and even the sense of laughter when it suited the tone. This wasn't merely revolt was shrewd, but others affixed to newspaper listings and posters. Rieu was the first to post on social media. Even his rivals were aware of it. When additional orchestras were discussing if Instagram was too, Rieu's casual style has already gone popular. Danny Boy's performance in Dublin didn't merely reach fans, it went viral. Attracting millions of views, similar to a top-charting music video. Despite his brilliance wasn't only about using the internet, but also how he utilized it at every tour stop. Local topics, regional music, and stuff that seemed specifically designed for that. He invited more than just his admirers to the city. Dragged them from the polls to the show. Freebies, parties, and sneak peeks every in order to create a sense of community, gave the impression that classical music everyone's property, not just those who internalized Beethoven's symphonies. Then came the period of movies, which was not satisfied. Stadiums were sold out, so Rieu brought his performances on a large screen, but rather than recording a stage and making a call one day, he shared a tale. In his 2025 he accompanies fans to the movie The Dream Continues. Traveling via river through his hometown, combining behind-the-scenes home videos, video and live performances from everyone around the globe, it wasn't only about music, was now about recollections. Feeling and allowing the audience to. Even the movie theaters were part of his dream. Had to change, as the guidelines for people are suddenly silent and straight-backed. May bring some snacks, have some drinks, and